Thank you all for coming on such short notice. We did want to make ourselves available to talk about some of the violent crime that occurred over the weekend. I will stress, if anyone has a tip about any of the shootings that occurred over the weekend, you can call Crime Stoppers 614-645-4749. They also have a Facebook presence that you can go on and submit a tip anonymously. We had a number of shootings over the weekend. Of note, on Saturday at two city parks. The first city park off of No Bixby Road occurred. A male was shot and was ultimately expired. Later in the day, we had a shooting off of Atchison at another city park. A young lady was shot and also expired. There were other victims in the second shooting that are witnesses. The thing that is really important to remember as we stand here right now is some of these shootings happened 24 hours ago. And so as we speak, there are teams of detectives that are working these cases. We need to be extremely cautious about what we put out for prosecutorial integrity. You may have some specific questions about that, but I was just speaking with the detectives to see what specifically they would like for me to get out. They have received information from the public, which is fantastic, and we appreciate that help. I did want to briefly cover, to give you a perspective and context, where we are as far as crime statistics for the year, understanding that a lot of the year is left, and this was our first really warm weekend that occurred. Year to date, we are at 36 homicides. About 91% of those in 2022 are by firearm. In 2021, we were at 64 homicides. In 2020, we were at 35 homicides, and in 2019, we were at 36 homicides. Felonious assaults, which are stabbings, beatings, shootings, we track those as well. And so this year to date, we are at 342 felonious assaults. Last year at this time, we were at 468 felonious assaults. One thing that we've seen a slight uptick in is firearms seized or recovered, 917 of those this year. A number of those we're seeing firearms stolen from vehicles, and so that's something that we'd like to get out. Either secure your firearm not inside a vehicle, and all of you have been covering the number of auto thefts that we've had. If your firearm is inside, when we recover the vehicle, oftentimes the firearm is not in the car. I should go back. Our homicide solve rate year to date is 63%, and felonious assault solve rate, which is a really key figure, is 28.9%. Both of those are higher than this time last year. And I think that's all I will cover right now as far as crime statistics. I'm not going anywhere, and Chief Potts can talk briefly about additional topics, and I'll stay around for any questions. Thank you.
I don't know if anyone had any questions.
When it came to the park shootings, do you guys happen to know if there are any surveillance video or any cameras in the areas of where this happened? I know there was a school at the one park.
I can tell you that we are confident that we will recover video, but I'm not going to go into the specifics of angles or where the video is from, or if we recovered that yet. I can tell you that detectives are still canvassing the areas to recover those. I would urge, if you were involved in this shooting at either park, to turn yourself in and to come down and talk to Detective Niederkor in our homicide unit.
Are you confirming that victims of either of these park shootings, the mother of Mason Sauger said it was her daughter? She just got off the phone with the coroner's office to get confirmed.
I'm not confirming any names on homicides. Thank you for the question, though.
AC Potts, if I can ask, shortly after you started, we had two high-profile homicides in parks, Bicentennial Park and Far East Rec Center. At that time, both you and Chief Bryant pushed an effort to patrol the parks. Here we are again, two homicides in two parks in the city, hours apart. Where does your parks patrol program go, and what do you have to say just about having two homicides in city parks?
So our officers are being very proactive. As AC Bacher said, our gun seizures are up. That is not because we took this lightly. Our officers are out there doing more traffic stops, doing more investigations. But we knew that as the weather gets warmer, citizens are going to be out. What we're doing is proactively, we have officers checking the parks at every hour. As you are aware, we're losing over 100 officers to buyout, and so we have to be very strategic on where we put our manpower. And so as a team, myself, AC Bacher, Chief Bryant, and the DCs, we're looking at how do we put bodies in spaces that matter. And so you're going to see an increase in parks, you're going to see an increase in the neighborhoods, but we have to do it strategically and we have to be methodically because we're losing manpower, but we're also getting laterals. And so we're hoping that the lateral program will plug and play and put officers in spots very quickly for us. And we're also using the third class of the academy, and we think that that will help us plug some of the losses. But at the end of the day, we're losing officers, and so we have to use our manpower the best way we can. And we're looking at every way we can. Community support is huge. We had homicides and we had mothers and murdered children that were boots on the ground yesterday to help kind of quell some of the tension. And that's just important. It's a process of legitimacy for us. The community is now receiving us with open arms. We're getting more tips in and just showing that this team is working diligently to improve community relations. And I think that helps us with our decrease in crime and our solvability rate in homicides.
But what do you have to say to community members who now question whether it's safe to go to a city park on a warm day?
It absolutely is safe. Unfortunately, we're not in the minds of people who use gun violence to solve problems, but I can say over the many parks that we have in the community, most of those had no issues over the weekend. And so I want to tell that Columbus is still a very safe place to work, live, and play. We got a criminal element, and we know who they are. I mean, these are not people who are just anomalies. These are people who continue to do gun violence in this community, and we're going after them with our state, local, and federal partners.
And as per detail, when was it going on over the cold months now that it is warmer? Has it picked back up already? This was the first warm weekend. Or were officers checking every hour, as you said? And do they check every hour on maybe weekends, or do they do it every day?
So they're trying to check, but in between police runs, calls for service, and other things that they have to do, they're diligent, though. Our officers are committed to making Columbus safe. They've been that way prior to us getting here. They've increased their patrol proactivity since we've been here, and so they're going to do what they can. We're going to help them. We got more officers that we're trying to put on the street. We're looking to restructure the organization, and so as you move forward in 2022, you're going to see more boots to the ground.
So what is CP doing now that they'll lose 100 officers, as you mentioned, between now and the end of July? Obviously, those classes, those laterals, that's all going to take time. Those officers aren't going to be ready to be boots on the ground for probably 6 months, 12 months.
Well,
So what are you going to do for this summertime when you're so short-staffed?
So I want to correct you. The laterals are not going to be 6 months. That's the point of having laterals. They're going to be an accelerated program, so they'll be out very soon after they get in the academy. It's about, 12 weeks that they'll be out there, but they'll be hitting boots to the ground very soon. But you're correct as far as the recruits go. It takes about a 6-month process to get them out there, and then they have to go through coaching. But as AC Bacher said, we're working diligently. These are not things that we didn't unforeseen. We've been working since we got here, building our team out, and we're putting crime at the forefront. And you see that by decreasing numbers. I want to continue to push the fact that the community has responded positively to us. And so we're seeing that in the amount of calls that we're getting, tips and closures in our homicide rates.
What's your message to the people committing these crimes?
I can speak for myself, but I think AC Bacher is going to say it as well. We are not going to tolerate crime in Columbus, and we've proven that. We're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have the city attorney on board. Prosecutors are on board, and we're coming after you with the full extent of the law. State, local, and federal partners, we are tired of seeing the senseless gun violence in Columbus, and it won't be tolerated.
I'd like to ask about the hit and run on Morse Road last week, since we're
You
getting
wanna take
some
that
new
remote?
information.
You want to take it or you want me?
Including revelation that the driver was an unnamed, at this point, female. Is that driver being charged? Is that driver considered a suspect?
So right now, we're actively investigating this, and I want to tell the public, give us patience. We're treating this fatal hit skip like we would any fatal hit skip. We don't know who was driving that car right now. We know that there was possibly a male and a female from witness statements, and we're still very close, and this investigation is extremely early for us to make that determination.
Have you identified that female, and if so, is that person an officer as well?
The female, I'm not sure, has she been, I think she's identified or unidentified at this moment. I don't have that information, but I can get that for you. We do have an officer that we've identified. As we reported, he was relieved of duty pending the outcome of investigation. We have been in contact with the victim's father, There was a lag time in that just through the fact that we didn't know who she was at first. And so once we figured out who she was and we were able to contact her father, CPD has been in communication with the family.
So now that next of kin, yeah, now that next of kin has been notified, are you able to share her name?
I won't release that.
When did you have the communication with the father?
This morning.
This morning. And we were speaking with the family yesterday. They said that they found out through the coroner why, I guess, so many days from not reaching out or not putting a name.
So that is standard procedure. The coroner's office determines who the victim is. We don't like to put out preliminary information that could be wrong. And so we wait for confirmation from the coroner's office before we do next of kin.
So next of kin has been notified.
Correct.
So now we can.
I'm not going to release that. If the family has already told you, then I'll let the family tell you. But I'm not going to release that victim's name.
Going back to the park detail, as more officers, you said, will be boots on the ground. As we continue to get into warm weather, you said they will be checking the parks once a week. Is that per cruiser? What is the strategy with this park detail? Will they be getting out of the cruiser, patrol, boots on the ground in the park? If I'm a park rower, what can I expect to see from Columbus?
I'll let AC Bacher, because he's head of that, but it's not once a week, it's daily. So I do want to make that correction. They'll be checking the parks daily.
I
You want
apologize if I misspoke.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I think a parks detail is more formal than it is. And so I think it's important to realize that we're utilizing on-duty personnel. And so if you've been monitoring radios, you hear officers marking on 5.5As. That's a park walk and talk, which is going into a park, getting out of your cruiser, walking around. But that is based upon runs that are holding. And so if an officer on that district is dispatched to other calls for service, they likely are not going to be in the park as much. So we don't have a dedicated parks detail. We did that last summer. Beginning in late June, we started a parks detail, which was officers on bicycles going into each park. And we will eventually utilize that, likely with Safe Streets, later in the year. Those numbers will likely also be diminished. They'll be smaller numbers. I'm not going to go into specific numbers at this time because I don't have the plan in front of me yet. But we will be covering the parks. But we're not going to have a constant presence in the parks. So we won't be there 8 hours a day, is what I'm saying.
And this is coming almost a year after the two deadly park shootings from last year. Where do the homicide investigations stand for Mackenzie Ridley, for Olivia Kurtz?
Very advanced. And so our homicide detectives would tell you that they have gathered a lot of evidence and a lot of cooperating witnesses, and we are working with the prosecutor's office to file the appropriate charges.
So it is in the hands of the prosecutor's office right now?
No, it's not. We work with the prosecutor's office, though. When we collect evidence, we meet with them and we talk about cases regularly to determine where we're going with those cases.
We've heard from officers, and as you just said, the response to parks depends on calls for service. And we've heard from officers that they're stacked up and that, unfortunately, they can't respond as quickly as they would like now. So how can you guarantee to the public that those officers are going to be available to protect the parks as you say they are?
I'm happy to talk to you after this about how we solve a staffing crisis. But we may be there later in the summer when we lose personnel. And we don't know exactly what that picture looks like, so I want to put it into context. I can tell you that officers are going into parks. All weekend they were going into parks and getting out, talking with people. If you're asking for a guarantee that an officer is in there all day long, I can't provide that. But I can tell you that officers have been directed when they're available to conduct 5.5As, parks, walks, and talks in their city parks on their districts.
I do have one question, I guess just a clarification question just for myself. So going back to the fatal hit and run, so as far as with that driver, are we able to say if it was the person or the officer that is under investigation? Can we confirm that? Or the passenger, I guess?
We don't even have that confirmation.
You want us to name the, what do you want?
So
What?
if it's the officer that is under investigation right now, can we link that he was in the car for the press release that came out this morning?
I can't confirm that at this time. I don't know the answer to that.
this officer's personnel file. His attorney has told us it is him. I don't understand why he's not being named, especially if he has faced administrative action on your end.
He has not faced administrative action other than being relieved of duty.
So if my
That's,
terminology's off.
yeah, so that's standard. If someone is named as possibly being part of something that's wrong, then if it is a criminal violation, we relieve them of duty until we figure out what's going on. We have not figured out what's going on yet.
The question is, why not name it publicly if he's been relieved of duty?
Well, I'm not in charge. So we are trying to draw a bright line between criminal and administrative investigation. Chief Potts' side of the house is in charge of criminal. He is within my chain of command. So I really want to draw that bright line between criminal and administrative. From an administrative perspective, I believe there were public records requests done for relieval of duty forms, correct, which have a name on them. Is that right?
So why won't the department name him?
Have we not named him?
No.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'm not prepared to name him at this time, but I don't know why we're playing the game of naming, not naming him if he's in an official record from the division.
But not specifically linked to.
Are you asking, just for clarity, you're wanting Columbus Police to confirm that the officer in question was relieved of duty in connection to that hit skip, correct? And by naming him, which we have said that he has been relieved of duty in connection to the hit skip investigation, that does not automatically mean that he was involved in the car, inside or out or around it. Is that, I mean, I think that's where the semantics, where people were confused. It's strictly the officer was relieved of duty administratively in connection to a hit skip investigation. Because there's potential criminal charges that are facing whomever was driving that car, he has now been relieved of that, of his assignment and his duties until further investigation. We have not named any suspects, and no one has been formally charged in connection to the hit skip accident.
So if I'm understanding correctly, just to be on the same page here, he's named kind of on the administrative side of things for which we have request documents, but he is not being named on any sort of criminal reports at this time.
Correct.
But we can connect the dots here at this point.
I think I can share that he's, from an administrative aspect, he's been relieved of duty because there may be some information that he is, his vehicle was connected to that accident. Whether or not he was present or he was involved in the accident, I don't know that. Does that make sense? Well, the vehicle that was involved in the accident belonged to him.
And how did you figure that out? Was it a license plate that was traced?
I believe it was actually a caller. And I apologize, I'm not as familiar with the criminal side of the case as I am with the admin side of the case. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Just kind of a reaction. One last thing on the whole Parks thing. After the homicide, my colleague tells me, who went to NASCAR Park homicide, there were still kids playing soccer as a crime scene was being investigated and going on. Just knowing that little kids are witnessing this, absorbing it, what's your reaction to that?
I mean, it's devastating for any adult, child, but for a child to not be able to safely play in a park and see a body or crime scene tape, it's tragic. And it leaves unfortunately, a scar that we don't want that to happen to children, let alone adults either. And so this is why we're working so diligently to combat gun violence in the community. We understand that the vast majority of the citizens in here, they go to work, they live their lives, they don't commit violent crime. We have a small segment of society in Columbus that feels that they can do whatever it is that they want to do with guns. And so we're doing things on our end to combat that. As I said, we've been working diligently with our state, local, and federal partners, and we're committed to decreasing this gun violence. I think we have to give the community credit, but we also have to give our men and women credit. They have been out here proactively. The last 2 years were an anomaly. We had civil unrest, we had the pandemic, and so officers are now feeling that they can go out and proactively be police officers. And we're encouraging that as a leadership team. And so that tells you why you had over 900 guns confiscated. It tells you why our homicide closure rate is where it was this year versus last year. And it tells you that our officers are committed to doing things that we're tasking them to do under immense scrutiny. And so I think we have to lead this press conference with the understanding that community is committed. We've committed to them, and we're working together to combat this violence. And so we see that in a reduction of numbers that we've had, a substantial reduction in numbers, which is important for us to keep that at the forefront.
And just to clarify, the assault rate, it's being calculated differently.
That's
So
correct.
it may skew up or look like it's
That's right.
a bigger percentage than what actually may look like this year.
That's right.
So it actually is the national standard. When we got to Columbus, the way that homicides were classified was not the national standard way of doing it. And so we've worked under A.C. Bacher's leadership to make sure that we're giving ourselves credit for closures. We were not giving ourselves credit for closure rates regardless of what year that they happened. And that was something that we were not used to doing. In the city of Detroit, you count all your closures. And so it's not skewed, it's the facts. We're just giving ourselves credit for the work that's being done by the men and women.
It's just different than last year.
It's the right, correct way this year.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.